I'm Reem Nasr, your host tonight. You can access Tahrir's past programs via podcasts, and you can comment on our blogs, and you can consult our rich archive of poems, songs, and interviews. That's all on radiotahrir.org. Our executive producer, Dr. Barbara Nimyaziz, has added her latest blog entry to our webpage. That's called Nepal's Trial in Democracy. Be sure to check that out on radiotahrir.org. And our co-producer and co-host, Tamara is actually going to be hosting the next two shows. That's December 20th and December 27th. And we actually have a very exciting show next week. She's going to be hosting a panel discussion about education in the Arab Muslim community. We're going to be talking to people from private Islamic schools as well as public schools, and even some people who are in the homeschooling and business. So be sure to listen to that program. It's going to be very exciting. And now let's go for another short musical break before the second part of our program.
Zakar kumbud ma shakasa kushaba ya waylay urus khari qadama shajabu kushaba waraday ran sa shajabu nahil qamsho ya zawa ya raylay Akham ya zawachakar gulekho kushaba ya walayday Jawrawi hajkari mahaqwa kushaba ya rayday Chadat bghmaqakar qdabuch kushaba ya walayday Way wana qapi Shur raquza khurita ya rayday Arshish haza qadza qdaza rashwish ya warayday Rabaz qar kharshwishama rabja ya rayday Warti warqub shugha khari qutfaka zishur ya walayday Way wana qapid gushar razishan tada ya rayday Arsh jadam khathawi zawar qut fishwish ya walayday Jawrawi hajkari mahaqwa kushaba ya rayday Shad haq maqakar qdabuch kushaba ya warayday
In 2014, the Russian city of Sochi will be hosting the Winter Olympics. While the Black Sea resort is well known as a holiday destination, it is also a place that evokes pain for others. In 1864, following a brutal war over the North Caucasus region, the Russian army embarked on an ethnic cleansing and exile of the indigenous Circassian people. Today, an international movement has emerged to protest the Olympics at the city of Sochi as a denial of the genocide that took place there almost 150 years ago. Joining me in the studio to speak about the movement and the Circassian people are Tamara Barsik and Danyal Merza. Both are members of the No Sochi 2014 committee. Welcome to you both here on Radio Tahrir.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks, Reem. So, Danyal, can you begin by kind of telling us a little bit about that last musical piece that we just heard?
Sure. In the Circassian tradition, that's what's called a ghubza, or basically like a sad song. Circassians had a pretty oral tradition of oral history where stories of what happened to their forefathers were passed down in the forms of songs. That specific one was about the Abzak people and their encounters with the Russian forces invading their lands. And this was, this is from, this is a story that goes back generations and it still survives to this day. The group that's sang that version is actually from Maikop, which is currently in Edige in the Russian Federation. They go by the name of Zhu.
Mm-hmm.
And they have like a traditionalist approach to music, kind of bringing back old Circassian hymns and rubzas or sad songs such as these.
It was very beautiful. So let's go back to the basics, because some of our listeners may not be familiar with the history of the Circassian people. They might not even know who the Circassian people are. So can you just give us a very short overview of your history, your language, and where you are located on the map?
Well, basically, we're located in the Northwest Caucasus, which is in Russia today.
Mm-hmm.
Our nation is Circassia, and it's between the Black and Caspian Sea, very near to Turkey, in southeast Russia. Basically, we've been indigenous to that land for thousands of years. The reason why we're not in that land anymore is because 100 years of war was fought there. And in the last 5 years of that war, things went towards a direction of systematic killings and deportations. We, of course, call this genocide, and it's been actually recognized as genocide by a UN state member, Georgia. At that time, there were about 3 million people living in the area, indigenous Circassians. By the end of the genocide, 1.5 million were killed, and the remaining 90% were deported into the Ottoman Empire. So today you have 90% of a nation living outside its homeland, and about 10% still living in.
Where are most Circassians located today? If you could tell us maybe the top 3 countries.
Right, well, the majority of our population is in Turkey, and we have about 5 million Circassians living there today. Then you'd have the second most populated would be inside the homeland in Circassia, which is about 700,000. And then the rest was, you'd find them mostly in the Middle East, in Jordan and Syria, parts of Europe like Germany and France. And then we have actually a community here in New Jersey of 5,000.
So the Circassian community that's kind of been spread all over the world, have they maintained their language and culture and customs?
Yeah, for the most part, I'd say they have. But it's like any people that are out of their homeland. It's a very difficult thing to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
They've definitely kept a strong hold onto their identity. I mean, up to this day, I think me and Tamara are living examples of how well we've strove to keep it just alive and going.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back to why you guys are here today. Tell us why you're protesting the 2014 Sochi Olympics.
Well, actually, the Sochi Olympics will be the 150th commemorative year of the Circassian genocide. Choosing Sochi as the site of the next Winter Olympics basically represents the perpetual celebration of Imperial Russia's oppression and systematic murder of the Circassian people. The decision to hold the Olympics in Sochi is a clear sign that Russia is still failing to address the Circassian dilemma. Few people really remember what happened to Circassia, and for us, the Circassians, the wound inflicted by the Russians really is never healed. 1.5 million of us perished in the genocide. That was half of our population. To make this more clear to people, at that time, Greece was a population of 1 million. We were a population of 3 million. Today, Greece is 10 million. We could have possibly been a nation of 30 million, but we were denied by the genocide. Now, as if that weren't enough reason to be against the Sochi Olympics, there are a number of other atrocities kind of happening in the area. And one of the most that kind of hits home to us as the indigenous people would be the catastrophe happening to the environment right now. Sochi is actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's one of the most unique ecosystems in the world. And basically, they're just destroying everything in the area. World Wildlife Fund, Greenpeace have halted their cooperation with Olympus Troy. They've put out statements talking about the devastation that's happening there. The Green Party in Russia has also made comments as to, the devastation that's happening. There's about 3,000 unique plant species that are becoming endangered to become extinct completely from the area. So this is one area that I think a lot of people kind of might not connect with the Olympics, because the Olympics usually come off as being sort of green and happy.
Exactly.
But in this case, it's definitely not that situation. But besides that, there's also major human rights violations going on in the Caucasus today. I mean, not only to Circassians, but all the peoples living in the Caucasus. Close to 400 journalists in the last 10 years have been killed in Russia. So definitely no free press happening there. Every single day, people are beaten, they're killed, they've been kidnapped, and there's really, it leads nowhere. These things go to be reported, and nothing comes back to the families that have these people missing. And I think one of the last things that a lot of people don't realize is the mass corruption associated with these games. 50 billion have already been spent, but only about half of that is accounted for. Nobody talks about where the other half has gone. So you have all these different issues, and the last issue would be human security. In 2008, there was a war a couple kilometers away from where Sochi is going to be happening. And every single day you have bombings and killings. And so for the world to come and descend upon Sochi and try to, celebrate an Olympics which, are supposed to represent peace and human understanding and brotherhood, this couldn't be the furthest thing from what Sochi actually is today and what it means to Circassian people.
So tell us what happened when you went to the European Olympics Committee and kind of voiced your protest to the 2014 Sochi Olympics.
Right. Well, this all started in 2007 when Sochi was selected. Even prior to its selection, a group of Circassians who were concerned sent a letter out to the IOC, which the EOC is a part of, and let them know of the history and, warning them and saying, this spot might not be a good idea. The IOC went ahead and selected Sochi. So that was when we kind of upped our ante a little bit, and we sent them another letter explaining exactly what's going on and, our distress. They sent us a letter back saying that they were going to open up an investigation. Now, this was in 2007. We are in 2011 now, and we haven't heard anything back from them, even after multiple times trying to reach out to them. The EOC just last month met inside Sochi. And so we thought this would be a great time to kind of reach out to all these member states in Europe and let them know what's going on. So we kind of did this huge campaign, letter writing campaign involving all the members of the No Sochi 2014 committee and a group of Circassians from all over the world, and we sent out thousands and thousands of letters to each of these states letting them know. But once again, just as the IOC has kind of ignored us, the EOC hasn't responded yet. But we're hoping we'll get something soon.
Yeah. I hope so. In front of me right now, actually, I'm looking at a photograph from, I'm assuming that this is a protest that you guys had in Vancouver.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, there's people holding up posters, and one of them says, "Putin, don't build your credibility on Circassian graves." Tell me more about this specific protest.
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, in 2010, when the Olympics descended upon Vancouver, was actually when the No Sochi 2014 committee was formed. Prior to that, it was different groups around the world kind of protesting Sochi, but at that point, we decided to pool all our lobbying efforts together and try to make a bigger impact. And so No Sochi was formed, and we have members from Turkey, from Israel, from Jordan, from Syria, from the homeland, Circassia, from Germany, from France, and obviously California and New Jersey. And we headed over to Vancouver, and it's actually a funny story because you see, in the picture, you see Sochi House, which was holding the cultural side of the Sochi Olympics, which is hilarious because Sochi is actually, the last capital of Circassia, our homeland. And when we went inside to investigate a little bit, there was no mention of Circassians whatsoever. Actually, Kuban Cossacks, the people responsible that were hired by Russians to, commit the genocide against my nation, greeted you at the door dressed as Circassians. So it was really uncomfortable going in there and not having any sign of our people. And so we decided, okay, this is going to be the perfect spot to kind of hold this protest. Mm-hmm. And we just kind of plopped right in front of it. Security was all over us. They wanted to get rid of us. And they actually contacted the Vancouver Police Department. And I had a little chat with an officer, and I let him know why we were there and what we were doing. And they were very supportive. And actually, the First Nations of Canada were extremely supportive. And I'd like to give them a little bit of a shout out because they really helped us out along with the Anti-Olympic Committee in Vancouver.
Great. Yeah. Definitely. And just to add a little bit on there, when you asked about the slogan, Putin, don't build your credibility on Circassian graves. Well, a lot of people see this part of this Olympics as is kind of like a rebranding of the Russian image, and this Olympics is supposed to be kind of like the feather in Putin's cap, where it'll put kind of a nice bow on the end of his pretty much control of the country up to this point. And we're saying just that you can't ignore what our people have been through just to add this little feather to your cap. You're not going to do this without hearing us.
Exactly. And would you say that most of the people who participate in these protests and these other events, are they of Circassian origin, or are they kind of just everybody who's really not comfortable with the Olympics as an organization and then specifically being held at Sochi in 2014?
Right. Well, I mean, I would say that the majority of our support comes from the indigenous Circassian people. But we've been very lucky in that we've had support from all kinds of different groups, whether they be anti-Olympic, pro-environment, anti-corruption, anti-Putin. I mean, a lot of people don't, I'm sure people do realize this because there was a huge protest happening this past week in Moscow. But, tides are turning in Russia right now. The Russian people themselves are really uncomfortable with the government in charge. And so we've had a lot of support from Strategy 31. So we kind of try to branch out and reach out to as many people as possible.
That's great.
Yeah.
So please tell me and our listeners, what are the concrete steps that the No Sochi committee is taking? Are you going to different governments, different organizations, human rights organizations, and kind of how they're receiving your efforts and how you feel the committee is moving forward?
Right. Well, in regard to the work No Sochi does, our main goal is to spread awareness around the truth behind what happened in Sochi, the crimes committed against our people, and actually what we consider to be the continual genocide of our people. So what we do is we reach out to many different NGOs and try to build partnerships with them. And mostly the main thing around getting attention towards the Olympics is kind of getting your story published. Yeah. So we've been really lucky in the last 2 years since being involved in Vancouver and since the actual recognition of the genocide by Georgia, to have been published in Time, The Economist, Foreign Affairs, Newsweek, New York Times, and a number of different publications around the world. Other than that, we obviously protest. Exactly. And, people think that protesting really doesn't get you anywhere, but a lot of people kind of taken notice to the movement because of it.
It's definitely a very, very effective tool in terms of just getting the message out there.
That's good to know, because you're right. A lot of people think that protesting Occupy Wall Street, for example, is really not going to get us anywhere. But I agree. I think that it raises awareness and it brings the attention of the media, which is always something that you want to do if you're trying to push a platform.
I mean, it raises a question, who are these people? What happened to them? And for us, that's the most important thing, because we've kind of been erased from history. That's Russia's, number one tactic against us, which is just silence and denial. We bring something up, we talk about our history, and they kind of just deny it or silence us. And actually, it's very interesting. I'd like to just get into the recognition of the genocide really quickly.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Well, after the recognition from Georgia, we started getting a lot of media attention inside Russia, but not the good kind. They were basically doing whatever they could to discredit our history and the recognition itself. And just a few weeks ago, Moscow decided to invest about $3 to $4 million in building an institute to completely discredit the idea of the genocide. So for us, it's difficult to deal with a situation where you keep putting this truth out, and it keeps getting
squashed, basically.
Yeah,
I mean,
basically,
in our experience coming from with getting a message from Russia, it's kind of like listening to somebody out of both sides of their mouth, because on official levels they're silent. But if you were go to Reporters Without Borders and look at the ranking of free press in the world, you'd see Russia pretty far down there.
Exactly.
In terms of free press. So, official news organizations aren't that much more than, mouthpieces for the state.
Yeah.
And what you see on regional television in, prime time, concerning the Circassian question is, just political hatchet jobs. Mm-hmm. And they just run roughshod over the history completely. Just say completely untrue things at points. And, they just put this out there for their regional viewers that, it's basically the unofficial message from the Russian government.
And you'd be surprised, Reem. I mean, this protest alone by itself, to this day, Russia views it as a national threat. I mean, us protesting outside of an Olympic venue, they see as a national threat. I mean, just earlier today, I received a really interesting article by a political think tank from inside Russia. And you wouldn't believe the way they paint us, as CIA operatives exactly, working to destroy the state of Russia. When in truth is, we're just out here telling the truth, and they can't handle it. That's their best tactic against us.
It's interesting. I mean, Russia has had a really bad reputation with many of its ethnic minorities.
It's pretty deserved.
I mean, you would think that, though, in this day and age, that there's enough historical evidence to prove that this took place that Russia really cannot deny it. What kind of evidence is out there? And I'm just trying to wrap my head around how a nation in this modern day can just say, no, that never happened and we have nothing to do with it. And your small protests in Vancouver are really pissing us off.
Well, I'm just going to give you a quick little timeline of us trying to contact the State Duma and the Russian Federation. This didn't start with a small group in New Jersey, with No Sochi. I mean, you can go all the way back to when the Soviet fell apart. Mm-hmm. And in 1996, actual Circassian republics within the state of Russia, Kabardino-Balkaria and the state of Adygea republics, they officially recognized the Circassian genocide. And at that time, they sent an appeal to the Duma for that same recognition. And at the time, no reply was given. Once again, kind of just a silence or denial. Mm-hmm. Then once again in 2005, a group called the Circassian Congress inside Russia, inside MyCop actually, submitted a resolution and copies of Russian archives that they have obtained. Inside these archives was evidence proving the genocide to the Russian state. So, they put together this whole package, sent it to the Russian state, as well as the European Union, European Parliament, trying to get some sort of reaction. And luckily, this time we actually got a reaction from Russia. And their reply was interesting because we were referring to the atrocities that happened in the 19th century, and they replied to us by saying, the Circassian nation wasn't involved in the deportation of Stalin in the 1940s.
Uh-oh.
So it's kind of like, okay, interesting. You completely bypass our question. But then, luckily for us, in 2009, we sent a Circassian to the Georgian State Archives. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason why Georgia has these archives is because during the Russian-Caucasian War, whenever the, military officers would have to write reports to St. Petersburg, first those reports would go through Tbilisi in Georgia and then up to St. Petersburg. So Georgia has a huge, very extensive collection, of archives. And so we were very lucky. So this young Circassian man, his name is Ali Berzej, actually spent months and months on end going hand by hand going through these archives, trying to pull out information relevant to us. Now, when he came back, we put together a case and evidence, and we submitted it to the Parliament of Georgia in 2010. The Parliament of Georgia then took that evidence and formed a committee of about 12 scholars and experts in genocide and political science to go through the archives themselves. And on May 20th, 2010, they actually voted in a unanimous vote to vote that the genocide did in fact happen. I was there, I saw it, and it was a very emotional, significant moment for our people, because it was finally a moment of another nation after 150 years saying, yeah, hi, you exist. Yeah. This happened to you, and it's a big deal.
So as of now, Georgia is the only nation that has recognized the genocide?
So far, yes, but we are very hopeful and working on getting other nations to recognize it as well.
So I remember in the beginning of the interview you said that most Circassians live in Turkey.
Yes.
What's the relationship between that huge Circassian population, which is 5 million, it's a really big population, and the government there?
Well, actually, in Turkey, a lot of the high-ranking military officers through the years and a lot of people inside Turkish government actually are Circassian. But the problem is, as everybody knows, that Turkish nationalism was very strong. Ataturk made sure that, you were Turkish and you were nothing else. And so growing up in that environment, a lot of Circassians had trouble. Their names were changed, and they weren't allowed to speak their language. So their identity was suppressed for so many years, and now it's kind of blossoming. And Circassians are finding their way again. And I'm not saying that they didn't speak the language. They did. Inside the villages, to each other, they spoke and they saved it and they kept it going. But I think now it's kind of a reawakening for the Circassian nation inside Turkey, which is very exciting.
That is exciting. So tell me about any efforts that you guys are undertaking to kind of work with the U.S. government about this issue.
Right. Well, for us, we thought that the logical step would be first to go to post-Soviet states who kind of understand our situation, remember our history, and see what kind of sympathy and help we could get from them. Mm-hmm. And we've been very successful in the Baltic states and many other places. Mm-hmm. And so we're kind of working from Europe out. And so the U.S. is definitely on our target. And actually, Danny could talk to you a little bit about what we've done with the U.S. Congress.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Pretty much quickly after the hostilities between Russia and Georgia, there were some Pennsylvania congressmen and senators that actually did put forward some kind of I don't know if it's a legislation, but it was some kind of decree, declaring that the United States should not support, they should not participate in the 2014 Olympics because of Russia's actions with Georgia. And, just to build on what Tamara was saying in regards to, working our way out through Europe, it's more that, these people in the nations in the post-Soviet space most closely understand what our people have gone through. Because, there are people that were under Russian dominion, they were under Soviet rule for such a long time. And they know what it is to kind of have your identity chipped away at and just eaten. Yeah. And now that they have their independence, they're very wary on losing it at any point in the future.
So tell me, as we get near to the end of the interview, kind of what are your next steps? What are you working on next in order to keep this movement going on?
Right. Well, for us, I think it's really important that people understand that the No Sochi movement, in regards to the Olympics happening in Sochi, yes, we are focused on the tragedy that happened to us 150 years ago, but that genocide hasn't stopped. It's continual. We see killings and kidnappings are a norm in Circassia. Very recently, actually last year, a very well-known professor of mythology named Aslan Spina was just gunned down just because he was trying to promote Circassian culture.
And his killers hasn't been found as of yet, and never been identified.
Yeah, I mean, the termination of Circassian language classes in schools inside the republics, the immigration policy of, trying to re-immigrate diaspora back to the homeland, and the harassment Circassians receive inside just for speaking out, it's a form of continual genocide. And so we just want to make sure that people realize that to this day, this is happening, and we hope that anyone who is empathetic to just human beings trying to live their life and trying to live in a way
with some respect.
With some respect and promotes their culture, should be able to, and that's what we're trying to really get out there.
I shouldn't I shouldn't be called a liar just for talking about the facts of my history.
Right, exactly. Especially since this is a history that most people aren't even familiar with.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's kind of another aspect of it. It's been completely swept under the rug. Nobody talks about it. It's denial up and down officially.
Yeah, I mean, our conversation today was very interesting, and I'm sure our listeners think so too. Is there, where can we direct them if they're interested in this movement and they want to get involved?
Right. Well, if you want to become part of our mailing list, that would be the best way to get in touch with us. It's at info@circasia.org. You could also visit our website, which is www.nosochi2014.com. We're huge on Facebook. We have a No Sochi page that you can visit. And if you're actually in the New York metro area, which probably all your listeners are, we have monthly events at our sister organization called the Circassian Cultural Institute. So if you get on that mailer, you'll be able to kind of hear more about it. And we have really interesting scholars and different characters that come in and talk about history and culture and just politics in general.
Danyal, do you want to add anything?
No, just it pretty much sums it up. If you want to get involved, maybe just write your congressman. Mm-hmm. Just let him know of what you heard today.
Yeah, great. And we're also going to link to the website on our own webpage, radiotahrir.org. So if any of our listeners didn't catch that, they can go onto our webpage and find that. So I really want to thank you both for coming in. I think this was a really important topic. And I really think that in the future, Radio Tahrir can do more segments about the Circassian people and focus on a different angle.
That would be great.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
So
and thanks for having us in. It was
absolutely.
A great pleasure for us.
Thank you for coming in. My guests were Tamara Barsik and Danyal Merza. They're both members of the No Sochi 2014 committee. And I would also like to thank Tamara Ishaq for actually producing this segment. She did a lot of work, but she wasn't able to make it into the studio tonight.
Yay, Tamara.
So today on Radio Tahrir, we featured Wafa El-Azabi, who spoke about early intervention for special needs children. And Zaid Saleh also joined me in the studio to recap on the latest from the Egyptian elections. Special thanks to Max Schmid, our sound engineer, and our webmaster Aiden Beldachi. Executive producer of Radio Tahrir is Dr. Barbara Nimri Aziz. For more information about Radio Tahrir and to get our podcast, you can visit www.radiotahrir.org. Go in peace and health and return in peace and health.